Hello, everyone. This is Tijen Genco, Master Certified Coach, Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. You are tuned into Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. And as usual, I have my wonderful companion, Cynthia Late, with me. Welcome, Cynthia. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Tijen.
So good to see you today. And Cynthia, what are we going to talk about in this episode today?
So this is really an interesting topic. When a coach finishes their training, most new coaches are really eager to put their acquired skills into practice. And although they've acquired significant coaching experience during their training, their clients have often been fellow students and supportive friends and family. So the question that we're asking today is what happens when you're coaching in the real world with more complex scenarios?
Hmm, that sounds good. I've seen all sorts of scenarios as in my practice, in my as a mentor and supervisor, as well as assessors worldwide. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
it's amazing the scenarios that pop up. And then when you're in the middle of a coaching session, you try to go back to what should I do? And sometimes you don't know. So it's really nice to kind of talk about this up front so you can go into a coaching session a little bit more prepared.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons why that International Coaching Federation, ICF, asks or recommends also the coaches to have a mentoring relationship so that one can, even if it's not at the session, you're not going to have wait a lifeline. I got to call my mentor, but you can at least talk to your mentor or supervisor after the fact, certainly.
Wonderful. So today we'll explore some of the challenges that come up when you're coaching. And I'll just start it off with a question for you. Tijan, can you share a common coaching scenario that might be particularly challenging for a less experienced coach?
Yeah. So it could be an ethical issue, such as um, the client, maybe there is a conflict of interest that one may not always be able to easily recognize that. It could be that ethical issue in a way that there is this sponsoring organization. For those of in our audience are not familiar with the terminology, sponsoring means that somebody other than the coachee funds the engagement, um, so that they maybe have a different idea or expectations of the coaching engagement outcome than the coachee. If the coaches that don't do a good job defining what that is in the beginning, they get into that trap.
Mhm.
The client makes an engagement for coaching, but they don't necessarily understand what coaching is. So they can ask advice, they can place the coaches to the trusted advisor role. Often it happens in the executive coaching scenario, or asking to coach to make a decision for them, even accountability, right? Newly graduated coaches love that they want to be the accountability partner for the client. I'm like, well, you're creating dependency.
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
even recognized, right? We're not supposed to be part of the client support structure. They need to establish it themselves. So there are a lot of things can show up, and those are common. Coachability of the client also is one of the things that this is why I had that session episode around coachability, how they assess the coachability. So, uh, and the other thing that, again, inexperienced coaches get into that they don't establish clear definition of when the client is liable to pay the fee.
Mhm.
If they are not canceling on time, they're not showing up on time, right? And or things like that, that then they feel difficult to bring it forward or discuss. And is it the place to talk in that coaching session? No, it needs to be handled differently. So a lot of those things come into my mind. What do you think about hearing all that?
When you talked about it, I recognized some scenarios that I came across when I was early in my coaching career. Specifically, I think a lot of coaches fall into this camp is you get very good at something, at solving problems, and all of a sudden, when you become a coach, you're no longer solving the problem, but it's easy to fall back into that because you've seen success with it in the past, and you have to really step back and say, well, this isn't my problem, it's my client's problem, and what's getting in the way of them solving their problem. So
Yes.
this kind of thing, yeah, check, check, check. I've seen a lot of those. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there is one more thing that I was thinking and I forgot to mention, which is that when the coach has more than one license
Mhm.
or more than one role, then the clients can assume that they can tap into those, or the coach can easily fall back and forth. That at least for the, or most of the coach organizations are very specific about when there is the engagement is done as a coaching, it has to stay as a coaching engagement. You can't be going back and forth as a nurse, as a doctor, or in health and wellness coaching, or a consultant in the professional and executive coaching. Yeah, the
Yeah.
role distinction has to be also honored. Yeah.
So when you come into some of these scenarios, how do you successfully navigate some of these challenges?
I think that one needs to go back into their inner navigation system.
Mhm.
And I talk about that in my master class to Sufi approach towards the heart. Also, universal partnership, right? What does this event mean at a higher
Mhm.
degree level? And then finding the appropriate answer. So it is, I'm giving you this ambiguous way, but because let me share what happened to me and
Mhm.
early on. Soon after my graduation, I volunteered for the International Coaching Week, and Coach ICF pair me up with an individual which I've never met before. And they had 2 sessions with me. And they showed up to tell me they are diagnosed with a terminal illness. They have 3 months to live. And they wanted to use the session to plan their departure and transition. And I was not ready for such a thing. And I'm a new coach. I have a lot of life experiences, but I wasn't prepared for such a thing. So then I went deep in that moment. I didn't want to decline. There
Mhm.
was this person showed up,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm talking about, the universal partnership. Universe offered us this meaning.
Mhm.
And so I thought about that. I thought about what am I supposed to be doing here? Uh, how do you even prepare somebody for such an exit? Then I said, okay, I'll just follow the process. And I did. I actually started coaching this person. What does preparing for that transitioning meant for them, and so on, to find out they had a lot of anger, unprocessed anger, for losing a particular position, and they still wanted to serve. They had actually social work and therapy kind of a background. So we discussed, and they still wanted to be functional and helpful in the society. And they went ahead, and even though they didn't belong to a particular religious group, they went, talked to them, and got a little room in their temple and did all these things. And I ended up extending our sessions. But these things show up. And so what do you do then? First, that we need to come back to the integrity and finding our purpose in such moments and respond to it within the given ethical boundaries best as we can. Another thing that I talk about is that, in my view, the coaches don't need to have the subject matter expertise to be able to coach. But when we don't, we may not have full magnitude, understanding of full magnitude, what is happening. And not that we need to respond from the subject matter expertise perspective, but we also need to be able to appreciate and understand the challenging difficulties in the situation. So if they have that, it will also be helpful keeping the coaching boundaries intact, understanding the seriousness. For example, that a person in charge of an hospital can come and tell you in a coaching session, well, I have my labor partner protesting outside of the hospital. What can I do? If you don't know anything about anything, then you may panic. If you know something about something, then you may get into advisory mode. But if you understand the circumstance and seriousness of it, then you can actually, from that space, very gently continuing the coaching, making sure the client decides. So I think that I'm giving you a long-winded answer. I think there are multiple things can be happening and helpful for the coaches, finding the true north, understanding the larger purpose maybe that can actually help us center. If there is a subject matter expertise, really appreciate what might be happening. If you don't, you can have a dialogue about with the client. What does that mean? How is that working for them? And then keep staying in the coach's domain to respond. And remembering that if they feel unequipped to respond, they don't need to. They can say, this is beyond my expertise. If they know who to refer, they can refer or exit, or they ask the client to talk something else.
Yeah, so there are a lot of options.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up, and this is something I remember from my coach training, is to trust the process and to stay curious. And this is what happened when you had your client who was terminally ill, that you were open to, let's try this and see what we can do.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I heard from you is around context. If you have context, you can ask a little bit better questions because you understand the magnitude of what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Because what I see as a mentor, Cynthia, often that coaches go beyond their head. When I'm listening, the assessment recordings, the client, for example, comes in a sponsored engagement talking about how they're planning to take their supervisor to the court. And the coach is continuing in the conversation. So this is what I'm saying, that you need to understand the whole system and function within the system, that the more appropriate response is, this is a sponsored engagement. This is going outside of our boundaries. and so on. Or the client in the health and wellness space, client says, oh, I'm having heart palpitations. And coach is like, oh, would it be helpful be us doing breathing exercises? No. So, I mean, there has to be some level of sensitivity to what's happening here and understanding and responding appropriately. Yeah.
And there's, as you talk about this, I go to this, I start thinking about, I've had one client in the past who actually needed therapy more than coaching. And so how do you navigate that when you like, is this coaching? Does this person, what would help them best? And how do you make that determination?
Again, if they cannot make that determination, they can discuss with a mentor, but often that if there is a lingering issue that is not going away and it's keep coming to the coaching, that could be an indication that client isn't able to resolve the emotion, but they have a desire to do so. When the client, and this is again, a lot of the problem solver coaches love that, right? The client comes and puts the coach in an authority role. And they want them to be responsible. Oh, can you send me the reminders? Can you do that? And coach like, yes, I will do that. No. And so that could be, I say that the coach and the client always need to have an equal sign between them. That would be another thing, because the therapist often is superior to the client. They have, they design the treatment process and all that. And these could be some of those things, but coachability is another thing. Maybe the client doesn't need a therapy, but can they coachable? So I think that the main distinction is going to be, again, what is the client looking for in this partnership and how healthy and capable they are to show up to carry their own partnership would be the best way to assess.
I love that you talk about coachability, because I have a scenario in mind and I'm actually really wondering if the person is coachable. So I'll share with you this scenario. I'd love your feedback on it. So an organization sponsors coaching, but the client isn't fully committed to the process. And they appear engaged during the sessions, but they just don't follow through with scheduling. They're just stalling their progress. How might you handle the situation?
This is, again, I have a policy that I don't take any executive coaching engagement, even when I'm sitting at an executive coaching bench, that the third party does that arrangement, without talking to coachee and the sponsors. Because that gives me the probing questions, gives me an indication, the availability, readiness, and desire for the coaching, because often a lot of the organizational resources want to get into or enrolled into the coaching because they are high performance and they want to get into the trajectory of the promotion, but they don't have any desire. So when I sense that in the initial discussion, then I don't take the engagement. A lot of the coaches jump in it. It is harder to say no to the money, or they don't know this may happen. Then they get in there. So let's say that it wasn't the case. You started the engagement and this is happening. You need to have the discussion with the client, the coachee.
Yeah.
This is what I'm seeing happening. What are you thinking about it? And they may show up in truthfully or not. And then I also often make sure there are more than one meetings around the engagement with the sponsors. So I would ask a 3-way, 4-way, whatever, however many the sponsors are, discussion.
Mhm.
This is where we are, this is where you want to go, so to make it clearer without getting into the details. So those will be some ways to address.
And I love that you're already partnering with the client even before the engagement starts to make sure that you're working together on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to share a story. When I worked in the corporate environment, we were coaches, and we would volunteer for different programs that would happen within the organization. And people would sign up for these programs and they would get a coach. And so me wanting to get my coaching hours up, I'm like, hey, I'll be a coach. And so I ended up being assigned, and I distinctly remember one client who had signed up for the program because he wanted to get promoted, but he wasn't 100% committed to the coaching. And so all the typical signs, he'd miss a meeting, he shows up, and we're coaching, and all of a sudden I see him and he's checking his phone. And we're on camera like you and I are. And it's not that hard to see when somebody is on their phone. And I just paused. I said, so what's happening with your phone? How does that contribute to the conversation? And he just really was mortified that I had seen that. And in the end, he just didn't want to be coached. And I said, oh, that's perfectly fine. You have to want to be coached.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was crazy for me. And again, because we're in it, we know the value of coaching, but some people just aren't ready for it or don't see the value for it. And we just ended our coaching engagement right then and there. And it was okay.
Yeah,
It wasn't punitive or angry. It was just this wasn't what he wanted.
absolutely. And people want to be promoted, but they're not everybody are interested in the self-awareness,
Mhm. Yeah.
self-development.
Yeah.
They just want to do the things the way they know how to do. And so it is helpful for coaches to really recognize that
Mhm.
before the engagement. And it gets to be more challenging when you are an internal coach, yeah, like
Yeah.
you were. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to share another challenge with you.
Yeah.
It's a client comes to a session unprepared, or they're unsure of what they want to focus on, and they say things like, I don't know, I'm not sure what to work on. How do you support a client as when they're in this place of indecision?
Well, one needs to determine that is it a place of indecision or is it that they don't have an interest and commitment, right? Those will be two different pathways. The latter will be the one that we just discussed.
Mhm. Yeah.
And these things again need to be discussed in the early on during the chemistry session to see how are you going to prepare to show up, and this is my role, that's your role, that sort of thing needs to be discussed. But let's say if they came and unsure, then it's okay for coach if they have a some level of relationship. Coach probably knows the client. It's okay for them to offer some of their ideas for the change and see how they land on the client. Or they can explore client not having any topic. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right?
Great question.
They could postpone the session based on their agreement, and um, or they could also do different things, talk about maybe different assessments if that are helpful for the coaching. I mean, one can be very creative
Yeah.
in a session depending on who the client is. I often go through easy pathways when the client presenting their case with a metaphor, like I don't know, then I will just ask questions like I never almost have that sort of a response for me, but what is the benefit of not knowing? That opens up the whole thing,
Yeah.
right? How do you function when you don't know something?
Mhm.
So that's, yeah.
Yeah. Those are beautiful questions. The other strategy I like to do is go back to the original agreement when you began the engagement. When we began
Yeah,
about
yeah,
this, is this still a priority for you, or where are you with this
yeah,
topic? So,
absolutely.
yeah,
That's great
yeah,
idea. Yeah.
So I have another challenge for you if you're ready. Some clients are highly analytical and may not respond well to visualizations, metaphors, somatic inquiry, or energy work. How can a coach meet these clients where they are and support them in a way that aligns with their values?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I often say to my students, you probably heard it too. They complain, oh, our clients don't want to go deep. Oh, our clients is this. Well, client is not there to satisfy your needs. That's number one. And number two is that, and maybe because that, as you said it, they coaches often don't have the real clients. They're used to practicing with one another. They're thinking that's what's going to happen. Um, the mastery in coaching gets in the way of the coach's ability. And that's also the ICF competency. Respond to the client in their own metaphors, not the coaches, in their own stories, in their own language. So even if that isn't coach's language, which, I talk about that in my neurologic approach to coaching. So the coach is not to translate their world and ask the client to get into their world, but rather coach needs to meet the client's world. So I think that remembering the coach is there to need to be adaptable, flexible, and getting out of their comfort zone will be helpful for coaches.
I love that you brought that up. I'll just give an example. I once had a client very analytical, and I tried a metaphor and all these things, and it just landed flat. And then he talked about his daughter, and all of a sudden he softened up. And so we sort of used his daughter as a metaphor, and we covered a lot of interesting ground. And for him, that was the place where he allowed himself to be less analytical and a little bit more in his body and feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it is okay. There is nothing wrong with that. As you know, I'm a holistic coach, but I do have some executive clients. I mean, I would say just one person up to date, or after all these years of experience, I give reflective assignments, as you know, to my clients. And this executive, after a year of being together, I asked him if he's willing to reflect on
Mhm.
his growth. And he said yes, and he came back with an Excel spreadsheet. It was the first time we could create pivot table out of his things and categorize. That's fine. And somebody else might have done it a vision board or something else, but they wanted to have an Excel spreadsheet. So
Oh, what a beautiful example of they're speaking in their language, and
yeah,
that's how what works for them. So it's that was really great.
yeah.
We coming back to coachability. We talked a little bit about coachability as far as how it might impact the coaching process. How might a client's coachability change over time? Is that possible?
Yes, I think that the coachability it goes back into the way I teach the trans-theoretical change model. I say that that model applies in every second of the session. It's
Mm.
not that they go one stage and another month and another stage. In a session, this goes into a little bit of the coaching, neurologic coaching beyond the polyvagal theory. The one thing that client coach can say that triggers something in the client can automatically put the client in a defensive.
Mhm.
And then the coach will feel rejected, and then they their ego get hurt, and a whole thing can happen. So the coachability, and this is where that rapport
Mhm.
is something you don't only build in the beginning or in the beginning of the session. It is happening throughout the session. And to me, I also do not find a lot of the coach schools teaches their coaches to have a chit-chat conversation in the beginning to build a rapport. I don't find any value in the chit-chat because it doesn't establish any deep connectivity and deep reflection. And all of a sudden it just abruptly cut because the coach feels like, oh, I need to get into coaching now. And that actually feels like a rejected or leave that topic, jump into something else. So coachability is something coach needs to tend to throughout the engagement and in every session. It can change. A lot of things can affect besides this traumatic triggers and safety responses and other things. But change overload, the things happening in the client's life, right? A lot of people were in a change overload during the rise of COVID. They couldn't take anything anymore. Or people, I know that there was a period in my life, there were so many losses, one after another, one after another. I just couldn't handle any more change. Yeah, the deep losses, then it's a magnitude of the change also. Depth and magnitude of the change can affect. Financial situation can affect. The dynamics can change. For example, if the coach and a client engaged at a time that they both had a people-pleasing or codependent tendencies, and if one of them did their work and got into a different place, that dynamic is going to no longer be there. They can't be satisfied themselves in the same way that they did before. So any one of those things can affect the coachability. Also, then the client can come to a situation, or they may be scheduling sessions more frequently because a lot of the coaches have certain mandate, like you have to have this many sessions a month. I don't do that. You go, come back whenever, but know that if you expand too much, then we may need to start the work again. And so then they may haven't even implemented anything yet, but they are coming back. So those are some of the things that come into my mind.
And I love that you bring up this paying attention to change and change fatigue, and people underestimate how much change somebody can undergo at one time. When there's a lot happening, it's really hard to take yet one more thing to change. So the desire for change might be there, but they just can't do it.
Absolutely. And also circumstances triggers that desire to change can change. Such as there is a sponsor, a manager wants this person to be developed in that way. And then all of a sudden that manager goes. Are they motivated the same? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Or people, right? The New Year's resolution, they want to fit in this dress and they want to go get coaching, and then that event goes and that goes away. So, yeah.
Yeah, such great examples. We've talked a little bit about this before, but are there any additional challenging scenarios that you've experienced in your coaching career that you want to share?
I think I've shared some of those things in two different scenarios. One of in the health and wellness versus the executive, but another one that comes into my mind that as a life coach, I also support people moving through deeply emotional experiences. And there was a time that I had a tragic loss in my life, and somebody showed up in a similar tragic loss. So luckily, I couldn't say that I was fully processed it, but I was at a place to appreciate that, again, subject matter. Unfortunately, unwanted subject matter expertise in this case.
Yeah.
And then to be able to respond to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just share one scenario that I have, and we talked a little bit about it earlier on, but it's I have some friends who have offered coaching, their sponsors, one of their family members. And so I agreed to it. And what I'm finding is when I see the friends, they ask questions. And I like, I can't tell you anything about what's going on. I really have to have that division because I can't talk about it. But it's so hard not to talk about it because we have already this relationship. But I really reminded myself we can't talk about this.
Absolutely, yes. And sometimes you also can be the coach for the sponsor, the supervisor, and the coachee. That also happens to me that I hear the manager, I hear
Yeah.
their
Yep.
team members and all that, and where is the truth?
Yeah.
Somewhere in
That's
between whatever they are telling you. But this is the case, right? That the over identification, we didn't talk about the identification with the client, transference. And so if the coach then chooses a side, then that can be a challenging, right? Who are you identifying with?
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where the problems are going to occur. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the end, I just wanted to kind of come back something you alluded to earlier is around supervision and coach mentorship. Do you want to share a little bit more about how important that is and how it can really help support a coach's growth?
Absolutely. I mean, it offers a safe space to discuss what happens and how the coach responded and what was happening in their inner dialogue. I often give a self-reflective questionnaires to my um, student clients to look at what happened to them after each session. So this way, then in a mentorship, then the mentor coach can give them ideas and also look at their skill sets and all that. In the supervision, they can also check in their emotional responses, mental responses, and other things. So it is helpful. It also, in a way, feels like you have a support system that in itself, even if you're not meeting with a mentor, knowing that if you need to, you have somebody identify with that you can actually go talk to that person is quite a good support system, especially when you're taking these high degree risk
Mhm.
coaching engagements. Even if it's not that high degree, you still it's a good thing to have, right? The check in with somebody else, because we say it in the executive coaching that the higher the person is lonely.
Mhm.
They are, the top is lonely place, but so is the coaching, right? You keep everything confidential. Hopefully,
I
who
like
are
it.
you gonna talk to, right? So, yeah.
I'll just add, the ICF does have these supervisory coaching sessions every so often where you can just show up. And I went to one and I was amazed because nobody ever gave me a straight answer, but the questions they asked I came away with so many insights like, why did I go down this path or why did I think that? And all of a sudden you have this whole and it shifts your coaching. So it's really, and again, I don't have a supervisor coach, but just going to the session, like I can see the value of having somebody coach you about your coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. Yeah.
So as we come to a close, Tijen, any final thoughts before we end the session?
Um, I think that challenge is gonna be happening, whether in coaching, outside of coaching, or wherever it is. And individuals, the coach's response and understanding of their responses to challenge could be helpful also for them in this particular context. How do I respond to any challenges? What do I do with that? And how do I support myself through that? And also getting familiar with the ethics and understanding of that, and looking into maybe talking to other people. What are they experiencing? Yeah, anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think it's so helpful to talk to other coaches and mentor coaches about the situations, because I find when I get into sticky situations, it's due to my thinking. And all of a sudden, when you start, oh, I made assumptions, or I wasn't curious enough, or all of these things that actually make me a better coach. So the more I ask questions and make mistakes, the better coach I get, because I'm not hanging on to, I have to coach this way. So it really helps to expand your thinking and grow as a coach when we do exactly what you talked about.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So, Tijen, how can people find you, and what do you have coming up?
What I have coming up is just as this subject. So with requests, I developed a ICF credentialing exam prep course. And this is actually, we are going to specifically talk about case studies, such as the ones we shared, and then look into what may be the best response scenario, what may be the worst response scenario, and in those. And this is not only just the preparing for the exam, but also understanding how the competencies are helpful when one understands them at depth, responding to challenging situations like that. They are there to support the coaches. Often that the coaches think, oh, they are checkbox I have to do in a session. Not really, but yeah. So that is going to start in second week in November. That's coming up. And people can actually go into gencocoaching.com upcoming events page to read more about it and to register. And another one that it was actually you inspired me. You were asking me after the branding sessions and the beginning of this year, Tijen, why don't you run a strategy setting group coaching? And so I actually created a package for that. We are going to end the year with looking at what we want to resolve. So with the New Year's resolutions, the first session is going to be, and then the first session in the new year will be strategy setting. And then the rest of the 10 sessions are going to be in a group setting environment, where people come and see where they actually block themselves in the execution of the strategy and then move themselves forward. So it is in a way combo. Tijen, you're getting there. You're getting the corporate strategist, Tijen, with some tools, and the corporate executive C-suite coach to get you coached in a more affordable way. So that is, I'm excited about that, is coming up. Also is going to start end of the year. It is listed under upcoming events. The last group mentor session for this year is coming up. It's going to be starting in November, halfway full already. So if anybody is interested in being in a supportive environment, as you're talking about, and to grow and get into the mastery, that's coming up. And then my special way of taking into mastery and beyond, the master class in Sufi philosophical pathways to heart. So this is actually, as we talked about, looking the life events at a deeper lens. What is the meaning of this? How do I understand and interpret? What are my regular responses? So it is a very interesting and lovely group coaching sort of and a discussion class. So that's also going to be open again for the next year's registration. So yeah, thank you for that. Anything else you wanted to share with the audience?
Yeah, actually, before I move on to me, I just wanted to say a couple things. I've been part of your mentor sessions, and what I love about them, and I've been part of other mentor sessions, and what I love about the one that you do is there's pre-work and post-work. So you don't just show up with, here's my problem, we're all going to solve it. There's a lot of it's a more holistic approach, which I really love because again, I grew as a coach every single time. So
Thank you.
that's why it's half filled up is because it's that good. So I really good sessions.
Thank
The
you.
other thing I wanted to mention is I love the strategy program that you're putting together because you're right. It's you can go to a course and have all of these plans, but then the follow through is the hard part. And it's so
Yes.
easy to say, I have a plan for the year, and then a month later, oh wait, I'm going to binge watch this on Netflix. I'll take care of that later. So I love that you have these checkpoints to really help people stay on task because the accountability as a group is wonderful.
Yes, and also you actually taken some of my group
Yeah.
coaching sessions, and you
Yeah.
know that how actually everybody's progress supports each
Yeah.
other and weaves into, so there is the group growth as well,
Mhm.
besides that. And yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing those. Yeah.
So for me, I am actually this month I'm relaunching my website and my programs, and now I have programs for career. I'm a career strategy coach, and relying on my 40 years of corporate experience to launch this. I have a program for people who are early on in their careers who are just starting out, and they may not even be working, but they're looking for work. But it's really hard when you're first out of college because when you're in school, everything is more or less prescribed. And once you get into the working role, there are no rules anymore. There are rules, but there isn't the structure. So to have a plan, have a place where you can talk about where you want to go, what you're looking for, where things fit, and what may be a nice next step for you, is a great coaching opportunity. So I have one program for what I'm calling early talent. Then I have another program for what I'm calling Jumpstart. And this is for, as women, we are taught to be good girls. And
Mhm.
that programming is very deep.
Find a wild girl within, right?
Exactly. So, and while good girl works when you're in the home and in school, when you get into corporate, it doesn't get you very far. So, what do you want to do with that? How do you step into a little bit wilder version of yourself and really get what you really want? And so there's that program. And then I've got a third program, which is really around pivoting when you're more experienced, and then you've got the thoughts that are going in your head. Who's going to hire me? I'm too old. I'm too experienced. All of those kinds of things. So what are your next steps? So those are the three markets I'm putting together. And you can find everything at my website at cynthialate.com.
Lovely. So,
Yeah.
Cynthia, I think that it will be helpful for you to speak about because I also have listed as a career coach under ICF, and people reach out to me. They're thinking that I'm going to help them write a resume.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So, do you want to? And I tell them no, but go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, there are tons of people who know how to write resumes and who know how to do interviewing skills. This is really about mindset and getting to what you
Yeah.
want for yourself. So, I've spoken to some clients and they're saying I'm too old. I'm like, what, why do you want to let that thought stop you? How do you pivot to put yourself in a position of what's your value? What are you offering? So it's really about who you are and your mindset. You have a lot of control. And people love to get into this little small space. I have no control. No, you have a lot of control. So it's all around the mindset for your career. I will not write your resume for you. Sorry, there are people
Excellent.
who are very good at that. It's not me.
Yes. So the behavioral
Yeah,
response and removing cognitive restrictive beliefs and expanding the looks like self-confidence
exactly.
and the authentic self. toward,
Exactly. And
yeah.
it's getting away. We just get so good at censoring ourselves that we limit our choices where they're narrow. And it's like uncovering some of those thoughts that we have that we've put away. And how do we bring them to the forefront? And how do we look at this holistic picture of ourselves and what are our next steps? So yeah, that's what it's about. Thank you
So
for the clarification.
yeah, I mean, it happened to me many times. That's just why I thought it would be helpful for us to talk about. So thank you, Cynthia, for this wonderful conversation. And our audience, if you missed it at the beginning, you've been tuned into Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. And if you like what you heard, consider subscribing to us. You will find us anywhere that is wherever it is your favorite podcast environment is, and feel free to leave us a feedback and yeah, connect with us. Take good care for us.
Thanks, Tijen. Bye-bye.
Bye.